Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. It's Friday and I'm joined by Colin Watt. Always a pleasure to see you, big fella. However, we're going to have to dig into last night's performance. Obviously, we covered the game. Colin, you watched the game. Where did it all go wrong last night?
Probably the start of the second half is where it all went wrong. As soon as that whistle went, unfortunately. Look, there's two ways of looking at it depending on how you view Celtic as a whole. Either last night was just a pre-season game and we shouldn't worry about it and it'll all be fine by the time the season comes round and we'll bring in players before the window closes and everything will be all hunky-dory, sunshine and rainbows. Or the other way of looking at it is we played a game last night, which is our second last pre-season game. At this point of pre-season, you're looking to get your team bedded in, the team that's going to start against St Mirren in a week's time. And when you take two or three bodies out of that, suddenly it's massively weaker. And you already needed one or two bodies in there as well. So the way I look at it, I think we are massively unprepared for the season that lies ahead. And I don't think it lands at the feet of Brendan Rodgers. I think it lands at the feet of the people above Brendan Rodgers. He's clearly can only work with the players that he's got just now. But it's been a month now, Paul, since we signed a first-team player. A month. People will say Inamura and they'll say Yamada. They weren't brought in to improve the first team. They were brought in as squad players. It's been a month now since we signed Benjamin Negan. That's for me is worrying. And do you know what? This today might be a bit more negative than some people want it to be. But I think we have to be realistic in the point of there's a lot of progress to be done with this team and this squad. And it needs to be done a lot quicker than the way that the board have been acting.
Listen, I don't even see it as negative, Colin. I just think that, right, okay, pre-season friendly aside, we went out to a team last night who absolutely gave us a seeing over in the second half. And I think what you're saying is right in terms of it's not about a starting 11, is it? It's about having a core group of 16 to 18 players, whereby if you get that inevitable injury or suspension, then you have the quality to bring into the side. Yep. Celtic in the second half last night were toothless. This is a word I'm going to keep going back to, I feel, in terms of the lack of aggression, Colin, you know, and particularly in the three big guys that we signed last season. I know Trusty didn't play last night, but I think there's a lack of aggression when it comes to just making sure that by hook or by crook, that shot doesn't happen that ends up nestling in the top corner for the fourth and the fifth goals. I don't think we were aggressive enough in that respect. But the lack of quality, there are concerns because we have been in this movie before in relation to looking at every single word that Brendan says in press conferences, Colin, trying to transcript them, trying to figure out what he means by it. And I don't think he's been as brutal this time round, but he is sending messages in these press conferences. He's talking about ambition. You know, he's talking about players for the now, which you correctly refer to as the types of player like Kieran Tierney and Negrin, guys who are going to make a difference right now in that starting 11. Yep. And we're not signing enough of them. Money is not the issue. It's not as though we ring fence what we made in this transfer window, and that's what you're playing with. We've got all the money a football club could want in relation to that. So why are we not getting our first choices? Why are we not getting them in the door early enough? And why, 9 days before our first competitive game, don't we look ready? Now, after the Newcastle game, Colin, I was at pains afterwards to say, look, we're not getting carried away. You can't. And I'm not going to get carried away after last night. But what it does do is it lays bare the deficiencies of this squad. And I think Brendan cuts a bit of a frustrated figure at times.
Yeah, he does. And his comments last night, I wanted to make sure I had them in front of me because I didn't want to misquote him. His words were, when talking about transfers, yes, it depends what your ambition is. If your ambition is to really progress and push forward, then we need to improve the squad. But I can't fault the players that are here. They've been working so well, so hard. You see some of them play and how the work has been very, very good. Now, he finishes it by saying, however, if you want to progress, then, as I said, you need to bring in quality, and that's something we hopefully can do. He has mentioned twice in that short part, if we want to be better.
Yeah.
If we want to improve. If we want to progress. Why is it if? Why is that a question?
I think the big issue there, Colin, is you've got three factors here. You've got the fans. In terms of expectations and ambitions, you've got the fans, you've got Brendan and his players, because I'm pretty sure that he's got guys like Callum McGregor who share his ambition. And then you've got the board. You've got the guys who actually pull the strings when it comes to releasing funds and having that level of ambition. Now, I quoted this yesterday in relation to it wasn't that long ago. Peter Lawwell replaced Ian Bankier, and Bankier made it pretty clear that they had no European ambition. They had no ambitions in Europe, Colin. They had this attitude of, oh, there's no way we can compete with these guys, right? And they were so far removed from, a lot of the fan base. We don't talk for everyone. Of course we don't. We talk for ourselves, and we get a good gauge from the comments coming in, from social media, Colin. But a lot of Celtic fans want to progress. It's not just about being the best in Scotland, is it? It's about looking at last season and saying, right, actually, this new format might suit us. Mm-hmm. Clubs like Celtic might be able to thrive under this new kind of format that's been put in place, where we could be looking at 10 European games a season. That's phenomenal for a club from Scotland, where the income streams aren't what they are elsewhere. So it does come down to ambition. I think we lacked ambition, and I don't think I don't think the current regime is all that different. I really don't, Colin. I mean, we're going about spending 11 on Ingles and 9.5 on Ida. But again, if you ring-fence the transfer window, we didn't spend anything because we sold our best player, our biggest asset. We sold Matt O'Reilly. Mm-hmm. So in terms of spend, I don't think we've shown that ambition, even when we have brought in big name players. There's always going to be that flip side, and we try to be balanced, Colin. I do think in terms of quality, you need to go out and buy. People will disagree about who you need to buy in terms of what positions.
Yep.
Three I think we've got two starters in the door already, Kieran Tierney and Benjamin Nygren. Nygren, bit of a surprise to me, maybe not to the guys who scouted him. He looks class, right? I think we need another three of that level who come in and take a first team jersey.
I would argue you maybe need more. And I says this on social media last night. I think you're closer to 5, maybe 6. And the reason being, I think it all comes down to what Brendan Rodgers just said there. If you want to improve and if you want to progress as a team. For me, I think Kasper Schmeichel, not his best performance last night, but he's still at a high level where he's very good for this club. Sinisalo's came in and he's looked as if he can step up to that level as well. Still a young keeper, still developing. Centre-back positions frighten me. Absolutely frighten me. We've got Cameron Carter-Vickers who came back to play 45 minutes, his first 45 minutes of the season. Hasn't really kicked the ball since May.
And it looked like it showed.
You could see it. You could see it. He's rusty, right? And that's fine. You kind of expect that. This part of pre-season, you don't really want a player to be in that position, but it's just the way it is in terms of his return from his operation. Liam Scales, anybody who's watched this for a while knows I'm not a fan of Liam Scales. I don't think he offers enough to be a first-team player at Celtic. He could be a very good squad player, but for me, he's not somebody that starts. And then if you look at Cameron Carter-Vickers' injury history, he's averaging at least one semi-serious injury a season. So you're looking at potentially bringing in 1/2 centre-backs. At left-back, we've got Kieran Tierney came in. Inamura, when he came off the bench yesterday, probably his biggest challenge to date. Wasn't the worst player on the park, but obviously shown that he's not a natural left-back. That's fine. He isn't a left-back. So you're maybe looking at bringing somebody in there. Not a starter, but you're looking at bringing somebody in there. Then we go to the right-back position. Anthony Ralston's been the bricky. He's been the Celtic go-to for the last however many seasons. I think he's due a testimonial this year. If I'm, it was either this year or last year.
11th season this season.
Yeah. And of that time, I think he's made just over 100 appearances, if not less. He's someone who is an able backup, but he's not an able backup to play 20 games a season. And that's where you look at Alistair Johnson, obviously coming back from the Gold Cup, only just back in training. Is he going to start the first game of the season? Is he going to play on Saturday? There's a lot of progress, we could upgrade on Alistair Johnston. Alistair Johnston's not the pinnacle of right-back positions. He's a good player, but if you want to progress and get better, your aim is to replace Alistair Johnston with a better player and for him to be the backup, not Anthony Ralston. So it's positions like this where if we only just want to replace the players that we are losing, like Nicholas Kuhn, like Kyogo, then you're only going to get to a certain level. If you want to get to that next level, you have to look at the players that are in the first team right now and say, where is the player that's going to replace them whilst they're still here?
Mm-hmm.
So like a Callum McGregor, we knew for years Callum McGregor was going to be Scott Brown's long-term replacement. Where is Callum McGregor's replacement in that team? There isn't one. On the wide areas, we're lacking. It's an area that Brendan Rodgers has spoke lyrically about over the last few weeks. We haven't got players that can come in right now. As it stands, Brendan Rodgers said in his press conference yesterday, he can't afford to let Yang go. As much as he knows there's interest, he can't afford to let him go because he's a first team pick right now. This is a guy that has played a total of 47 league games, only 19 starts, and he's got 6 goals and 6 assists. And that's your first team winger right now.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we're saying. We're not saying that everybody should panic, that we should shut the club down. It's all done. It's rubbish. There is quality in that squad. But if your ambition at Celtic is to only be better than the other 11 teams, then this is all that will happen. And you'll see the cycle repeat season after season after season. If you want to get to those heights where we took Bayern Munich to the brink, almost took them to extra time in that last 24 game, if you want to do that season upon season, you have to invest and you have to bring the squad up to a higher level. Now, we took Bayern Munich to the brink, Paul, but if we had beaten even someone like Zagreb, where
Bruges at home.
Bruges, we could have been in that top 16. We would have been a seeded team. We'd have got more money and we'd have got more coefficient points. That's the difference between having a good season like last year and building a structure where we target that season after season after season. If we have a terrible season this year, watch how everybody wakes up to see last year was just a one-off.
Well, you're talking about brinks. We're on that kind of precipice, Colin, where it's like you make your choice right now. Are you ambitious enough to continue consistently, which was a word that Brendan used yesterday when talking about Champions League? It's not about having 1 in 5 decent seasons. It's about doing it consistently. And only by doing it consistently can you gradually improve your coefficient points that would, in the future, give you the benefit of that. Now, the thing is, Colin, you're right. This isn't about throwing the toys at the pram, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, anything else you want to care to mention. But I'm going to bring up Liam Devine because it's important to note what we're talking about today isn't about last night's game. Last night's game isn't the story here. The story is us constantly failing to capitalise on a situation where we can leave the chasing pack at home in the background and aim for European progression. So Liam Devine brings us in here. Hopefully not too much reactionary BS today. This isn't a reaction to last night. This is frustrations that you could trace back to Brendan Rodgers' first transfer window in the summer and how disastrous that is, and we're still trying to clean up the mess. This is about Brendan Rodgers wanting a replacement for Kyogo in January and no getting one. This is about Brendan Rodgers wanting to keep Greg Taylor at Football Club and not being allowed to. Now, we can speculate at the moment about other transfer targets that Rodgers did want in the door. As these things happen, Colin, will find out down the line whether or not he was really after Fitzgerald, if he really does want Balikwisha. You know, you never really find out until well after the event. But I can tell you right now, Brendan Rodgers going into a European qualifier, which we knew about. You know, this isn't something that people have just sprung on us now, Colin. We knew this was happening. And we're underprepared. Last night showed that we are underprepared. It also showed the point you make that when you peel behind one layer, and that one layer might be good enough to beat most clubs in Scotland, if you peel back that one layer, then the quality's not there underneath. That second tier choice isn't good enough at times.
See, the thing is on that, Paul, it's like, if we'd mentioned this after Celtic beat Newcastle at the weekend 4-0, it would have been a case of, oh, you're never happy, you're this, you're that, and the next
you're entitled, you're bonkers, absolutely.
And then you mention it after a performance last night, which highlights some of the points that we've been making all summer. It's like, it's an overreaction, it's nonsense, you're entitled, you're this or that, and the next thing. These points have been there the whole summer. When the season finished, when we lost the Scottish Cup final to Aberdeen, everybody was in agreement that the squad needed brought on. We needed refreshments, we needed reinvestment in that squad.
Mm-hmm.
That game finished with Johnny Kenny, Dyson Maeda, James Forrest as your front three. There is a possibility that going into next Sunday, they are in your front three or front four, whatever Celtic seem to be playing this year, because we seem to have changed that formation. We've had a whole summer to get things done. We can't just rely on the last couple of weeks of the window for players that we chase all summer that eventually we can get the deals done. We have a important Champions League qualifier coming up that we need to be prepared for.
It's massive.
We have a very tough start to the season. We've got some very difficult away games at the start of this season. But right now, there's not one position, I'd say, in the team, with the exception of maybe the central midfield position, where you're saying we've got strength and depth there.
You know this, Colin, it isn't a reaction to last night's performance, but you're right. Had we had this conversation directly after the Newcastle game, people would have been calling us attention seekers, bedwetters and everything else. And I get that. So you've got to gauge where these discussions, which are not new discussions on Acsom, we've been talking about this type of thing for the 8 years that we've been on YouTube. Now, the thing is, Colin, we've spoken about the lack of European ambition at the board level. At that time when we started, Bankier was in charge. He was a chairman, rather. There's only one person in charge at Celtic, and it's not the chairman. So he was the guy with the lack of European ambition. We have since then gone through periods where we have been disillusioned with the decision-making at boardroom level. Like when Brendan leaves, you think, why? What's going on? We've got some of that information since then. There were issues in the boardroom, obviously. Then you move on to the appointment of Neil Lennon in the showers. We were unhappy with that. Just the unprofessionalism of it, the lack of ambition, taking it from where Brendan wanted to go to where we then found ourselves at that stage, losing 10 in a row. This isn't something that has just happened and we're kicking off because Ajax beat us in a Como Cup pre-season friendly. It's nothing to do with that in actual fact. What, as you say, that has done is that has shone a light on some of the deficiencies on the park. Some of these more deep-rooted issues have been there, and they've been there for a long time. State of the stadium, state of the youth development, the recruitment plan, constantly selling, which makes it difficult for you to build a side that can do something in Europe. I mean, I used one example last season. You brought up the Bayern Munich games, the head-to-heads there. And we were so close to taking them into extra time, absolutely, right? It was really a whisker. When you look across the two games, the amount of chances we had, Colin, unbelievable amount of chances created. And you just ask yourself, and it's no Kyogo, because Kyogo, obviously, him and Brendan, that wasn't as fluid as him and Ange, right? We get it. But we didn't replace him, Colin.
No.
We didn't replace him. And had we got whoever the striker was that Brendan wanted in January, he wanted somebody. He spoke about it at the time. Would that have been a difference? Would he have taken one of those chances that we created? Well, possibly. We'll never know. And this is the thing. It's almost as if we get to a point, Colin, and then we regress a bit. We draw back. It's almost as if you're scared to actually, go the full hog. Last night, in actual fact, we thought Shin Yamada had been injured. Turns out it was a registration issue.
Yep.
Last night was a UEFA game. We'd have been better just playing them and taking the 3-0 defeat, Colin. We'd have been better just playing Shin Yamada, having a look at him and taking the 3-0 trouncing. But joking aside, Yamada is a striker, but it's been confirmed he's no Brendan striker. And he's not a striker, like you've described, for the here and now to come into the first team, according to Brendan Rodgers. It might surprise him.
That's the thing. And obviously, Namuras came in. And do you know what? Let's go positive for 5 minutes here, right? Inamura's came in, and he was someone that was almost written off before he even kicked a ball because of the way that Brendan Rodgers had introduced him to Celtic, right? Had said basically, we're going to get him in, we'll probably put him out on loan. There was talk of him going wherever he was going to go. And he's come in, he's looked comfortable in the squad. He looks as if he's someone who could be a squad player that would maybe play 15, 20 games a season. That's good for the money that we've paid for him. Benjamin Negrin's came in. Initially, people thought he was going to be a right winger. He's been playing in that sort of 10 position. Last night, he looked brilliant on the ball. He looked a kind of cross between Matt O'Reilly and Tom Rodgick, the way that he was going. Very comfortable on the ball, could find a pass. Looks as if he's going to be someone that can split defences. A really important part of this new structure that we seem to be setting up with the 4-2-3-1. Kieran Tierney, excellent pass. That pass split the whole team wide open to play in Rio Hatate yesterday, who obviously put it across the box for Yang. A quality addition. He's a Premier League, top 6 Premier League player, and we've managed to bring him in, obviously because of his attachment to the club, but a fantastic signing. Same way that Ajax have signed for the third time, as we've seen last night, players like Davy Klaassen, players that have got a connection to the club, they bring them home, and that's a great signing for the club. Rio Hatate's came on really well in pre-season. I think he's really established himself. Mm-hmm. So there is positives from that squad, but there is also gaping holes in that squad as well. And people will say, well, you never mentioned it after Newcastle, as you said earlier. We mentioned it probably before Newcastle when you saw that team that came out. That team surprised us with the fact that they were able to beat Newcastle 4-0. That surprise, that result yesterday probably came as a surprise to nobody that saw the starting 11 that started that game yesterday. And as you say, small daft wee things like Yamada not being properly registered, it all just seems to add up. And what we want is for Celtic to break that trend, to do something that we don't expect them to do that's in a positive sense. Whether it be they come out next week and announce that there's a new stand development at Celtic Park, whether it's they announce the signing of 3 players that are going to come in and transform the first team and take us to the next level. But we don't have any credit in the bank for that. There's nothing in the past 5 or 6 years really that jumps out and says, this situation's under control. And that's what leads to panic amongst the fan base. I'm not saying everybody should panic at the situation that they're in, but for people to come out and have a go at others that are concerned of this situation that we're in, they've every right to be.
It's always been a way, Colin, and actually over the years of hosting a Celtic State of Mind, it's been normalised, that criticism, that scrutiny of who are you to say X, Y, or Z, and that's fine because every single person who supports Celtic is able to voice their opinion in a much different way these days compared to when I started going to the games, where it was actually you had to write in to Not The View because the Celtic Views letters page was full of letters that the board had written themselves under pseudonyms. You had to write into the Not The View and the One Sir Tim, and that was the way. That gave fans a platform for the first time in a long time, maybe the first time ever, where they could actually, they had a platform to express themselves, Colin. And now with podcasts and streams and all this kind of thing, it's a lot easier for a community of Celtic fans to make their voice known. But that is just within that's just within this sphere of Acsom. And there's a lot of people in the comment section saying, how do you take it wider? How can you get these messages to the board? Well, I can only talk about my experiences with Celtic as a board and various departments on how they are reluctant to take ideas on board or hear your voice, Colin. We're not at a stage like we were in the early 90s where various fan groups had to come together to force huge change. And I'm talking like get rid of the board, sack the board. But I think we need to now get to a point where there is definitely an understanding from the board's perspective that the fans' voice isn't heard. Now, they might go to the tried and tested, but there's an affiliation of CSCs and there's an association of CSCs, etc., etc. Do they represent the fans, because they didn't in the early 90s, because, you know, that was one of the biggest issues that these fan groups had back then. Save our Celts for change. And when you're talking about it now, it's not that level of change that we're talking about. It's a completely different situation. But there is a level of contempt, I feel, Colin, for the voice of punters like you, me, and many of the others that are watching this show today, whereby, what are you complaining about? Look at all the honours that we've won. What do you know about recruitment? What do you know about running a football club? But it's the Celtic fans that finance that whole operation.
I want to bring up something, because just what you said there rang a bell. I was looking earlier on because I thought we'd have this discussion about the board and about who is on the board. And Celtic actually have that on their own website. They have a description of each of the key members of the board and where they were before, and etc., etc. And the pit for Peter Lawwell is actually very interesting, where it says Peter Lawwell is the chairman of Celtic PLC, having joined the company as a chief executive in October 2003, served as a trustee of the Celtic FC Foundation, etc., etc., where he worked before. During Peter's tenure, the club has won 34 major trophies, 15 league championships, 10 Scottish Cups, 9 league cups, and qualified for the group stage of the UEFA Champions League on all but 2 occasions. That's a key goal. That's a success, is Peter Lawwell. And that's what a lot of people will say, is that Lawwell's overseen this, forgetting in the background that as much as that was a success, we were held back on several occasions. We could have went to that next level. We had the ability to go to that next level. So it shows you what they are very content in. They're content in being the best team in Scotland, whatever that requires, and to be part of Europe, not to grow and have a chance to compete in Europe, just to be there.
Participate.
We get a participation medal.
Participate, and that was the word that was used in the financials that really, you know, jumped out at me, was participation in the Champions League. It's about competing, not participating in the Champions League to a level. Now, listen, we're not sitting here, Colin, saying, I'm gutted we've not won the Champions League in the last 10 years. We know where we are in the food chain. But I think what happened last season is it gave you an insight into what can happen now, particularly with a new setup, and what can happen to clubs like Celtic and where we could progress. But as I say, it's almost as if we get to a point and we have a wee look over the edge and then we go back and we don't jump off that diving board. And there's a real apprehension for the board to push that wee bit further. The contempt issue that I've got is that, you know, often it doesn't feel like you have a voice as a Celtic fan. There was an occasion when we were recording A Wander Around Paradise. In actual fact, there was 3 of us, including the videographer. So this can be backed up. And a member of the Celtic staff, someone who's been employed at Celtic for a number of decades, drove past us as we were walking around the stadium and decided in their wisdom to do a U-turn and come back. And I thought maybe they're going to say something or speak to us or whatever. Maybe it's somebody that we know. They rolled down their window and told us to get a proper job. And as they drove away, called us a bunch of saddles. Now, that's somebody who's employed by the football club, Colin, right? Talking to a Celtic season title holder, by the way, and talking to us like that, that's disgusting. That's contempt. That's what that is. That's just one example. And I'm pretty sure there are other examples within the fan base where Celtic fans don't feel valued. We're just customers. And what they need to see through is that we're fans first, not customers first. I used this yesterday on the official X page. There were 5 merchandise tweets before 11 o'clock in the morning. 5. Now, that is overkill. That is treating you like a customer and not as a fan, Colin.
So on that, right, on the merchandise side of things, obviously there's the contract with Adidas, right? And you see what comes out and the amount of releases. By the way, there's far many more to come. That's part of this new contract with Adidas, as being an elite club, is you're going to see launches probably every single month. But for what we get from Adidas, the deal that's apparently worth £6 million a year, we always say that we're one of the biggest teams in the world. We've got this fantastic fan base. We sell merchandise to whatever level. £6 million we get for that. we were in the top 20 of kit sales last year. Liverpool are just about to announce their deal with Adidas that starts on the 1st of August. Some beautiful, beautiful kits, if you've not seen them already, been leaked. Their kit deal's £60 million a year. Now, they're going to sell 10 times the level of merchandise that Celtic sell. Not a chance. Not a chance. So it's almost as if we cling on to the bits that sound good. We've got a kit deal with Adidas, one of the biggest global manufacturers in the world. We're participating in the best competition in Europe, competing in the Champions League. But it's just participation medals. That's all it is.
That's an interesting comparison, Colin. I didn't realise it was as huge a gap as that. But I've said this before as well, and this is no disrespect to the individuals in the positions. I mean, you know, they're probably Celtic fans and they're thinking this is an amazing job to have. But it's not difficult to get Celtic a merchandising deal. Celtic are a global brand. You know, the goodwill that this club has across a fan base all over the globe is incredible. You're not walking in there like, you know, the commercial director of Stenhousemuir trying to get a kit deal with Match Winner here. This is Celtic. And you're always going to be, you know, there's always going to be offers on the table for Celtic's merchandising deals. Yep. So there is that to remember as well. And when you get that deal, all we ever hear, as you say, Colin, is, oh, it's the biggest deal in Scottish football history. Aye, but it could be a lot better. It could be a lot bigger for the football club in relation to that. Now, I'm going to talk about Brendan Rodgers here because Brendan Mark II, I think it's safe to say, conducts himself differently in interviews, Colin. I mean, this is just our observations. I think he sends messages in a different way, still sending them to the fans in a different way. He uses language that maybe isn't as firing shots as it was the last time with regards to Terminado and all that. We all remember it, right?
Yep.
But what are your concerns? Because as I sit here just now looking at the situation, I don't see Brendan Rodgers leaving before his contract, but I also don't see him extending his contract. What's your take on it?
So I want to bring up a couple of comments, and I think it shows the gulf between how some people view Brendan Rodgers and how some people how others view him, to be honest, Paul, right? So Jungle Lion comes in saying, looks like Rodgers and the board ain't on the same hymn sheet. Then you've got Breesman coming in saying, let's be honest, Brendan brought in Trusty, Ida, Engels, hardly a great strike rate for him. I'm worried. CM coming in saying, can Rodgers be trusted with more money? Engels, Ida, Trusty. We always seem to go back to these three. And then Square Sausage Mick, which I love that, by the way, and it's Slice. Mick, it's Slice. Rodgers
you shouldn't speak about Square Sausage on this show. I'm trying to be good, and now I've just got that vision and the smell, the aroma in my mind.
Beautiful,
so thank you.
Saturday morning breakfast, that's you sorted, Paul. Rodgers is not talking to the board as they don't listen. He's telling the fans why he won't be staying beyond the 3 years.
Yeah, quoted.
This is the thing. There is a lot of people who back Brendan Rodgers, like Monty coming in here saying that he left last time because he wasn't backed. He hasn't been backed again. Do people expect a different outcome? Rodgers is the best manager we can get at this club. Back him now. There's a lot of people like that who have seen past the fact that he left last time under a dark cloud and has come back and understand the talent that is Brendan Rodgers' coaching abilities. And then there's others that will come in and say, we're wasting money. We're bringing in players that aren't adding value to the squad. My argument in all of this is both are right. Both of these opinions are right. Brendan Rodgers is a very good coach. He's very good at developing players. He can bring players on. We saw it with Rio Hatate. We've seen it with Matt O'Reilly. We've seen it even with James Forrest the first time round. How he can take players up to that next level.
Mm-hmm.
But his signings are questionable. Some of them have been great. Some of them you're sitting there going, that's a lot of money. But why should that come down to Brendan being the player that has to go and identify the players for his position? A player that he signed himself is Kasper Schmeichel. Very good signing.
Mm-hmm.
It's
100%.
In my opinion, he's not going out there and looking at Shin Yamada playing in the J League and going, that's the kind of player I want. There is a recruitment team behind the scenes, as Roger says in his press conference yesterday, that brings together the footage, the stats, everything else of all these players and says, you want a right winger? Here's your 3 choices that we can afford. And that was the words that Rodgers used. There was affordability and compatibility in with the squad. These are the 3 players that we can look at. Target 1 is, let's say, for example, it's Balakishwa. And this is what we can do. He's going to be the hardest one to get because it's at the top end of our salary. Then we bring in player B, whoever player B is, and then player C. And player C might be the easiest one to get because he's got a release clause and it's a small value deal and it's easy to get over the line. Rodgers is not the player that's saying, if I don't get A, don't buy me B or C. He knows that you've got to buy these other players in. And the fact is, he's not the person that should be fully in charge of this recruitment process. Behind the scenes, we should have a sporting director. We should have a proper head scout. We should have people that just come to Rodgers and say, what do you want? What's the qualities you want? I'll come back to you in 2 weeks with that player. And we don't have that.
Can I just make a point here, right? And I've already had a few comments on last night's show about open your eyes to angles, etc., etc. But there's a default when people are talking about transfers, and I have been a big champion of angles, absolutely, right? But there's a default when people are talking about Brendan and people are talking about, you know, the reasons why Brendan shouldn't be given access to the checkbook, as it were, Colin. The 3 names that are always mentioned are Engels, Trusty, and Ida. Right, so if I was to say to you as a Celtic supporter, what's the biggest achievement last season? A double should never ever be taken for granted. Winning the league should never be taken for granted. But in terms of ambition, what was the biggest achievement? There's an argument to say that the progression in the Champions League was the biggest achievement, Colin. There's an argument. There's going to be people who disagree with that. But let's just use that as the basis of this argument that I'm going to try and pitch here just now on those 3 players. If the Champions League progression was the biggest achievement last season, then let's have a look at the three guys that constantly come into this bracket of a waste of money, right? Arnie Engels played the 10 games. So we had 10 games in the Champions League. He played all 10 games. He scores 1 goal, he gets 3 assists, and there were some man of the match performances. People then say, but man of the match, you know, it's the sponsor that organises it. In the Champions League, it's not. It's a UEFA man of the match award that you get, right?
Yep.
Austin Trusty last season, how many games did he play in the Champions League? He plays 10 games. Do we get the draw against Atalanta that's not for Trusty? I would suggest not. Adam Ida, how many games did he play? He also played 10 games. So they all played a full quota of games, not 90 minutes in every game, Colin, but they all contributed massively to those 10 games in the Champions League. He scores 3 goals, right? Do Celtic rather score that goal against Young Boys if it isn't for Adam Ida? Well, I would argue that they don't. And I would argue that if we don't qualify, right? So they 3 guys, constantly we go back to them. That's the default setting. Waste the money. Don't give Brendan access to the cash. But those 3 guys were part of, they contributed as much as anybody did to potentially the biggest achievement of last season, Colin.
Yeah, I agree. And do you know what? Going back to that, Engels, Ida, Trusty, £20 million. Yep, I agree with you. Another £20 million was spent on players like Barkas and Ayeti and the others that came in that window, like Ball and Golly. That was the best part of 15 million between the 3 of them.
2.5 loan fee for Shane Duffy.
We don't say that Neil Lennon was the worst player in bringing in transfers. It's been going on behind the scenes for a long, long time.
Yeah.
It's not just a one-off thing. Ange had a very good success rate in his first season, bringing in players from the market that he knew best because he had to. It was if you listen to Ange's interview quite recently with, it was either a Greek sporting media or Australian sporting media, and he spoke about getting the job at Celtic. Basically, he spoke with, I think it was Mark Lawwell at first. Mark Lawwell says, it's all great. I'm going to put you in touch with Dermot Desmond, and I think Dominic Mackay or Peter Lawwell, one of the 2 that was there. and over Zoom it was already decided, here's your contract, go and sign it, you're coming in. We spent all that time chasing Eddie Howe, and we never had a backup. That was a panic button signing to get an Ange, and it worked brilliantly, right? And you can say, right, brilliant. But is that the same process that we're using for bringing in players?
Colin, it was a lottery ticket. Now, at the time, going on again about the engagement of the club versus anything else, I can confirm at that time when the Eddie Howe deal broke down, Colin, we started seeing rumours online. You'll remember this, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
We started seeing rumours online, but it hadn't been confirmed yet. And then somebody from the media team phoned a Celtic State of Mind, and I assume all the other platforms who were attending press conferences at that time, Colin, and said, just to let you know, we are not going to proceed with the Eddie Howe deal. But there's going to be a narrative, and we want to set the narrative straight at this point. He wasn't the only candidate, right? So you kind of take that as read. I mean, you believe that, right, at the time. Later on, like you say, there was an interview with Ange Postecoglou where he actually let the cat out the bag because he confirmed that he wasn't contacted, I think, until 48 hours after the Eddie Howe deal had been announced as having. Right. So what we were told was not true. There was one candidate, and that one candidate was Eddie Howe. Ange Postecoglou comes in, and like you say, an absolutely phenomenal appointment. Absolutely phenomenal appointment. But it could have gone either way because we didn't have a list of options at that stage. This is Celtic. We should have a huge list of options. And you said something earlier on as well about the lack of preparation. The recruitment team don't just work in the windows. They're full-time, round the clock. By the time the window opens, it should already be ready. This is what we want. This is what we want to do. And then you're allowed to go through with the process during the window. You can't do all your work in the window, Colin. It should have already been done. And then obviously you get the contract signed, you make your deals, you do all that kind of thing during the window. You don't do all your work in the window, surely.
No, and do you know what? You can see there's instances where clubs have to act very quickly around situations. It might be a player like just now Newcastle are probably scrambling about trying to find a replacement for Alexander Isak because he's going to make the move to what looks as if it'll probably be Liverpool, who themselves had to go over a very serious tragedy and then try to piece together everything, and they've worked very quickly to do that while still being very sensitive to the situation that they were in. Big teams do act quickly. When something happens in the market that changes and an opportunity opens up, they jump on it. Celtic review the situation, they make inquiries, they bid 30% of someone's asking price, they close it up and say, we've still got to the end of the window to get things done.
I know, I'm going to bring in some of these comments. By the way, with regards to Brendan Rodgers, it's not like he's slumming it at Celtic. I mean, I do look at some of the talent that he had prior to coming to Celtic first time, and I look at sometimes I say, right, he's gone from Luis Suarez to Luis Palma. But at the same time, though, Colin, what he has done with the players that he's inherited, I think there's been a lot of improvement. I mean, Scales is getting slated this morning. He gets slated on a regular basis, but he has got 2 seasons out of a player that I don't think any other Celtic manager would have got 2 seasons out of.
Ange wanted rid of him.
Yeah.
You could see it. I mean, he was hours away from a permanent transfer to Aberdeen before an injury happened, and then he got himself in the squad. So, again, you could say that about other players like Ryan Christie, obviously.
Did Maeda improve? If we've seen the best of Maeda under Brendan, I would argue that we have.
Yeah. So there's definitely development there. But on the Brendan Rodgers thing, right, I've had this conversation with a couple of people. If Brendan Rodgers decided to walk away at the end of his contract at the end of next summer, where does Brendan Rodgers go? Because for me, he's damaged goods down south. I don't think there's a job that he walks into that he thinks is at his level.
Yeah, the entry level's below his expectation, I think.
Celtic and Brendan Rodgers are a very good fit for each other. But the problem is that Celtic know that as well. And Celtic know that he's not just going to walk away for a championship team. He's not going to walk away for a fighting relegation team in the Premiership. And the other jobs the other teams look at what he done at Leicester and go, don't know if he's worth the punt. So where does he go?
Well, you're right. He wouldn't do it because he's already done it at Swansea. He's already gone to a level and taken them up to the Premiership. He now sees himself as an English Premiership manager, I would suggest, because of the Liverpool. You know, at a time where it wasn't normal for Liverpool to win leagues, he almost did. He goes to Leicester. He wins silverware at Leicester. He does well in Europe with Leicester. And if you look at the league positions, barring his final season, for 3 seasons, he did really well. In the league for Leicester City. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, his entry level versus who would take him is 2 completely different things. Where he goes after Celtic, I don't know, but you're right. It is a good fit. And you made a point earlier about, you know, we don't talk about Neil Lennon being terrible at recruitment. All we tend to do is focus on the fact that he brought in guys like Wanyama and Virgil van Dijk, and there's been a whole host of players who came in and made a brilliant impact. By the same token, you could look at Ange Postecoglou. We always remember Postecoglou being a great talent spotter, etc., etc. Now, there were 3 players in Ange's second season who had been on loan the previous season, and the loan deals turned into permanent deals, not through obligation on 2 of them. But it was Carter Vickers, Maeda, and Jota. But if you look at the other signings in that window, in the summer window, you've got Siegrist, Bernabe, Jens. You've got Moy, Haksabanovic, Abielgar, Kobayashi came in the winter. Johnston came in the winter, Iwata and O. So there was a lot more misses than hits.
And how many of them are still here? How many of them are still here?
Vast majority of them are gone. But you're right, it's a perception. And when I look at the 3 guys who are getting it in the neck still by a lot of Celtic fans, not everybody, I always go back to that Champions League campaign last season. And by the way, it was the first Champions League campaign any of the 3 players had. So in terms of, you know, acclimatising to a higher level and a standard of football, I think they've done really, really well there. But they are coming in for a bit of criticism, a huge amount of criticism, actually. So on the one hand, Colin was saying we need that quality. If you want that quality, you're spending the guts of 30 million on 3 players. Yeah, but we did that last season, and look at the 3 we got. So where's the balance there? Is that down to Brendan? Is it down to the recruitment team? Is it a collective? Because I would suggest, I think it's a bit OTT to say that all 3 of those guys were wasting money.
We've had a lot of lucky moments. I say lucky, maybe it's well planned and it just comes across lucky. Picking up guys on the cheap, like Dyson Maeda, as you just mentioned. I think it was just over £1 million or something like that in terms of the loan and the obligation to buy. Rio Hatate was relatively cheap. Kyogo wasn't. Kyogo was like £4.5 million, if not more. And it almost goes back, and you always see it. There's a comment saying, well, we picked up this unknown guy from Feyenoord back in 1997 for 650 grand, and look how good he is. So let everybody have a chance. By the way, it's the anniversary of Henrik signing for Celtic today. What a throwback that is.
28 years?
Yeah, 28 years ago. Crazy. And that's the kind of money we're still spending. We're still spending 650 grand. See, if you go back to that window or the sort of time that Henrik signed for Celtic, we were paying £2.5-3 million to get players in. 28 years ago.
Yeah.
28 years ago. And that is the time where the biscuit tin had just been opened and it was time to start challenging Rangers again. And we were spending that kind of money, and it was great money. It's not great money 28 years later.
No, it's not. And by the way, you can still pick up absolute diamonds, and I think we've already done that with Nygren. Yeah, it was pointed out that there was a slack pass that led to one of Ajax's goals last night, but I tell you, over the piece, I thought Nygren had another very, very positive game. Strong runner. Bit of bite about him, Colin. You know, a bit about him as well.
I think he's got all the characteristics to be a top player.
Mm-hmm.
And that market is very attractive. I think it's a market that we sort of neglect quite a bit, is the sort of Scandinavian market.
Don't know why, when you think about the successes we've had in that region.
The players that have come out of there, obviously you've got Thiago Holm, who's not really kicked on, but you've brought in guys like Thomas Ronje, who I thought was a good player for Celtic. You've got players...
Reaper, I know we bought him from West Ham, but in terms of nationalities, you've got a lot of Danish, Norwegian, Swedish players who have done well for Celtic.
And obviously,
Matt O'Reilly was all right.
He's done not bad for an English, Danish, whatever he is. He's done all right. But you've obviously got Chris Ayer, who came in very young and developed as well. But there's some really good young talents coming out of there that have been picked up very cheap by the big clubs because they've been watching them for a long time and they've waited for the right minute to pull the trigger. Severe Nipan, who's just signed for Man City for I think about £10 million coming out of Rosenborg. If anybody that's played Football Manager, they know how good a talent he is and how much he's actually developed in real life as well. Because that's the difficulty. You can say, oh, he's brilliant in Football Manager, he's brilliant on FIFA, but how good is he in real life? He's developed really, really well.
I'm going to go old school here. Neil Ampty, Championship Manager. If you know where I'm going with that one, let me know in the comment section because we're talking 90s.
But then there's guys like Rune Bargi, who was at Copenhagen and had been there for a number of years. Young Swedish winger who has bags of ability, bags of potential, and had a very low release clause. Went to Barcelona there in the summer for £3 million.
I'm going to ask you a question.
There.
No, the market's there, absolutely, Colin, and we need to be tapping in. By the way, we might have a couple of gems that have come in from Japan. We don't know yet. We don't know. But, I think the comments that have been made by Brendan Rodgers would suggest that Yamada and Inamura are guys that aren't for the here and now. They could be guys that we might develop for some time in the future. But they might take you by surprise. I mean, Frimpong was a classic example.
Yep.
I always remember bringing Frimpong to the football club. Him and Lee O'Connor came in, and I spoke at that time to someone at the club who said it's neck and neck. One of them will be part of the first team squad. One of them will get loaned out, and it's incredible how their career paths have just gone.
I actually saw Lee O'Connor play football last season.
You did, didn't you? Aye.
I was at a Tranmere game last year, and he was playing centre half. He's the smallest centre half I've seen, but he was impressive. But you're talking about them being head to head. One's playing League Two, fighting for survival in the Football League. One's just joined the Champions of England. It's crazy how careers can just change like that.
It is, Colin, right? But you're talking about the stature, the physical stature. I mean, Frimpong wasn't a big guy, but the physical stature of O'Connor. What's been your thoughts about the guys that have come in from the academy for this pre-season? Because, we've given a 16-year-old their debut against Queen's Park, I think it was. We've seen Kel Ure playing and some of the guys from last season, Sean McArdle, etc., getting a game. Colby Donovan has looked pretty good.
Where's McArdle gone?
He's not been in the squad, has he? Don't know if he's carrying an injury. But what the question I was going to ask you, we watched Ajax last night, and I know that Ajax are famed. Celtic used to be famed for producing footballers. I get all that, right? But when you look at Bowman, for example, the ability's there, but it's the stature, it's the physical stature of these kids versus our kids. I look at the ones that we have played in the pre-season, and physically, Colin, there's so much development required physically. We have seen it in the past. I think we've seen it with Dane Murray, actually, this pre-season. Ryan Christie previously left the club to go to Aberdeen and physically, came back a different specimen.
Yep.
Kieran Tierney came back from pre-season as a different specimen. But I'm looking at some of the young guys, and I just feel that physically they're not there yet, Colin. Especially when you compare them to some of the boys we've seen last night.
This probably goes back. So I'd say before my time, when the Reserve League was at its peak, probably sort of 70s, 80s, start of the 90s, when it started to tail off towards the millennium, where you would have, say, Celtic playing Clyde at Parkhead, and the reverse fixture would be the reserve fixture played at Clyde Stadium. And there was players that weren't involved in the squad there that would go and play in the reserve game, and it was almost as if it was like a B Premier League at that point. There was young players coming through, but there was a lot of senior players that were either returning to fitness or just weren't involved in the squad that played in those games as well. And it kept them going, and the standard of that would have been very, very high. You look at the standard of football that these guys that we're talking about here are coming through and playing. They get a chance to play in the youth league, the Euro Youth League, against players at the same development stage as them just now. Mm-hmm. So when they're coming up against like Ajax's under-19 team or or the other under-19s teams. They're at players that are at that development, but it's that stage from sort of 18 to 21 where a player's either going to make the breakthrough, have that development that you're speaking about, bulk out, play first-team football consistently at the club that they're at just now, or they're going to drop down levels. They're never going to come through and be a player that jumps into another top team in the league. You look at the last sort of 10 to 15 years, how many players that we've thought they could make an impact in our first team. Guys coming through like Karamoko Dembele, names are escaping me here, but the boy
Ben,
went
Ben Doak, Rocco Vata.
Ben Doak's slightly different. Rocco Vata, for an example, ones that were on the fringes. And we've seen players come through. Even this season, I'm looking at guys like Ben McPherson, like Colby Donovan, like Kyle Ewer, like Jude Bonner, who looked fairly decent in pre-season. Kyle Ewer is joining Jude Bonner, I believe, at Scott Brown's United. I like Ewer. I think he's a good player. But these guys have to be playing senior football at that level to make that jump. As you mentioned earlier, Ryan Christie went to Aberdeen, was playing week in, week out, and developed as a player. Christopher Aya went to Kilmarnock and was playing week in, week out, and developed as a player. Before they went on those loan deals, there's no way that you'd have said they were key members of the first team squad. The same with Callum McGregor when he went to Notts County as well. These guys need to be playing at a top level to develop as a player. And playing in that Lowland League, they're not going to get there. All they're going to be is opening up their opportunities for their career further down the line. I mean, look at Lewis Dobie. Lewis Dobie was a top goal scorer for Celtic in the Lowland League last season behind Daniel Cummins. He's now just signed for League 2 New Boys, East Kilbride.
Yeah.
That's the jump. He's went from Celtic to East Kilbride. That's what happens to a lot of these players because they don't get the chance to play at the top level. Now, I'm not saying that every single player that comes through the Celtic Youth Academy could go on to be a star in the first team. Those days are probably long gone, where you had the likes of the Quality Street Gang coming through. But there is still players that you think, if you give them the chance and get them to play first-team football, the way that Kieran Tierney was afforded that opportunity, they can go from a player that wasn't very highly rated in the youth system, like Kieran Tierney wasn't, to being a star in the team. It's the exposure to top first-team football.
Yeah, it absolutely is, Colin. And there's an investment at Barrafield that we're well aware of. And, you know, you have an academy, therefore you need to produce players. If you are funding it to the tune of, let's say, $3 million a year, you need to produce players as a result of having that academy in place. And when I look at James Forrest, Callum McGregor, Kieran Tierney, to use 3 examples, I look at 3 guys who, you know, sliding doors moments. Kieran Tierney, we heard the story from the horse's mouth. We heard it from John Collins, how he became part of the first team squad. He had never been promoted from the academy to the first team squad. When they asked for a left back, they were going abroad. I don't know if it was pre-season or a winter training camp. They're going abroad. There was injuries to the left backs. They needed somebody as a backup, Colin, right? And they requested a player from the academy. They gave them the names of 2 left backs, neither of whom were Kieran Tierney. And then about 6 months later, that incident that we all know about, where by luck they needed somebody in training, Kieran comes over, and Ronnie Dyla and John Collins are saying to each other, "Who's this kid?" Because nobody had promoted him from the academy to the first team.
At that point, Daniel Church was the left back for the reserve team, and he was the one because the reserves used to play at Capello. That's what used to be their home stadium. And you can go back and look through the footage because there's still stuff on Celtic TV of the reserve games from then and the highlights. Daniel Church was the left back there. I think Daniel Church is playing junior football just now, and Kieran Tierney is playing in the Champions League. That's the difference between first team exposure and not getting that.
And there's a timing element. You need to get it at a certain time. Obviously, you know, and we lose Andy Robertson in and around that group. Callum McGregor, we almost sold to Carlisle prior to him kicking a ball for the first team. And then he goes out to Notts County on a loan. Jamesy Forrest, Neil Lennon knew about him as a youth coach at Celtic, gave him his chance once he became the manager. So I sometimes worry about that pathway, and I hope that Sean Maloney can do something with it at the football club. Colin, I mean, we've jumped from a few different areas of concern right into the youth development because of the quality that we've seen last night. of the Ajax. And I always remember Tommy Burns was always going over to Ajax, wasn't he? He was always going over to the Netherlands and trying to figure out how they produce footballers and then implement some of the systems into Celtic.
The obviously the idea of total football coming from Johan Cruyff and whatnot, that's changed. You feel like the game changes in so many different cycles. We're in a Guardiola cycle just now, where it's a lot of it is very boring football because it's all tactical build up and getting through the lines. You look back at some of the years gone by of like, and I'm saying years gone by as if I'm talking way back in the day, but even like 2012, 2013, the style of football then, as opposed to the way that a lot of people play now, is totally different. And that's going to change as well. See, when Guardiola decides that 115 charges is too many to give up, there'll be someone else that everybody tries to copy. Maybe it's Luis Enrique at PSG and the way that they play football just now. Everyone will try and build themselves around a style. And it's just that we tried something different last night, playing out from the back. I know we play out from the back regularly, but the way that we did it last night was just slightly different. There was massive gaps between the defence and the forward line, and it's what Ajax took advantage of. And some of those players that were coming through, that centre-half he looked untroubled through the game, and that finish was excellent.
And that's up against
17 years old.
Yeah, against someone with international pedigree who's played in the Champions League, Adam Ida, love him or loathe him. Celtic had 200 more passes than Ajax last night. So it needs to be something that ends with an end result, Colin.
And do you know the thing is, on a more positive note, Paul, we actually got the ball down and played some decent football at times. It was just getting to the forward line, and when it got to the forward line, especially in the second half, there was a lot of wasted opportunities. Yang put a cross into the side netting. I think there was long-range shots from Luke McCowan and from Arne Engels. We never got ourselves into that final third to create and cause Ajax trouble. But the difference being that when Ajax came forward, they were clinical last night. And that's what we as a team need to learn to be, because when we get into these European games, that'll be played at a high intensity. If we only create 3 or 4 chances, we need to be able to take them. And the players that we've got just now, I don't think have that ability to do so.
I hope we look back on this aftermath, Colin, as the season progresses, once we've got all the players in that Brendan wants, and we think, we were a bit agitated that day, but it all worked out fine. I hope that's the case. But history and experience tells me that it might not be as plain sailing as that. Listen, thank you, every single one of you. Well over 2,000 on a live stream on a Friday shows that there's a bit of frustration kicking about at the moment and amongst the Acsom audience. So thanks, everybody, for getting involved. It's always an absolute pleasure. We will be covering the game on Saturday night. I will be live at Bad watching the premiere of Ange and the Boss and doing a Q&A with Andrew's former teammate, Danny Craney, of all people who, as you will know, broke through at the same time as Charlie Nicholas at Celtic. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. It's always an absolute pleasure. And thank you, Colin Watt, for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.